The first time I realized my own brother could lie about me without even flinching was under the heavy glow of the school auditorium lights. The air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee from the catering table, and the faint, powdery perfume of the principal's wife. I was seated toward the middle, clutching the program for the spring fundraising gala, proud that the event, and the scholarship raffle, had finally come together after months of planning. Then, during the silent auction announcements, I heard his name. And of course, we need to give a huge round of applause to our primary family sponsor for the Marissa Blake College Fund, Daniel Blake. I froze. Daniel, my younger brother, strutted onto the stage to polite applause, straightening his jacket like a man about to accept a humanitarian award. My niece, Marissa, was beaming from the front row, looking at him as though he had built her dream with his bare hands. He took the microphone, smiled that politician's smile, and launched into a heartfelt speech about being there for family no matter what. I sat there in disbelief. The Marissa Blake College Fund was my project. Every paycheck for the past 5 years, I had siphoned off a portion into that account, making quiet sacrifices, packing lunches instead of eating out, working overtime shifts to make sure she'd have her tuition covered after her mother, our older sister, died. Daniel had attended one planning meeting, thrown in $100 once when he was flush from a good week at work, and posted a single Facebook shout-out a year ago. That was it. And now, he was rebranding himself as the benefactor. From my seat, I could hear the murmurs of parents, see the approving nods from the PTA president. When the applause rose again, I forced my hands together because Marissa was looking back toward me, and I didn't want to break her smile. But inside, my ears were ringing with the pound of my own pulse. I told myself I'd talk to him after the auction, clear the air quietly. But the way he looked down into the crowd, eyes landing right on me with a smug little half grin, made it feel less like a misunderstanding and more like a move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. And if I'd known what his next move was, I wouldn't have waited until after the applause died. Shall I write the next chapter? After the gala wound down and the folding chairs screeched across the gym floor, I found him at the refreshment table, swirling the last half-inch of flat soda in a paper cup, like he was already rehearsing for his next toast. "So, primary family sponsor?" I said, forcing my voice into a light tone, though my hands were still trembling from keeping it together all night. Daniel smirked, biting into a cookie as though savoring my reaction. "What? That's not wrong. I've been supporting the fund." "Supporting the fund?" I leaned in, so the chatter around us swallowed my words. "I've been building it for 5 years. You've contributed once, maybe twice. Why are you presenting it like it's yours?" He waved a hand dismissively, as if I were overreacting to being called the wrong middle name. "It's about optics, Viv. People like a simple story. Man steps up for his niece plays better than a committee effort. Besides, you don't exactly crave public speaking. I do. It's a win-win." I stared at him. A win-win for who? He set down his cup, eyes narrowing just enough for me to catch the shift. "For Marissa. For the family. Not sure why you're making this about you." And there it was. The baited hook. Accusing me of being selfish was Daniel's oldest trick. Years ago, he'd used it to skip his share of rent. Now, apparently, it was the excuse to rewrite my role in our niece's future. But the stakes were bigger now. This wasn't a cable bill or a kitchen chore. This was Marissa's education, the sacrifices I'd made without broadcasting them, the trust she had in me. If I called him out in public, her school social circle might turn the feud into gossip, muddying the scholarship's image. If I stayed quiet, Daniel would cement himself as the face, and possibly the sole controller, of the fund. I smiled tightly, pretending to accept his optics explanation, but I felt the ground subtly tilting. He thought I wouldn't risk confrontation in front of others. Maybe he was right. For now. The real test came days later, when another harmless change landed in my lap, and I realized the gala wasn't just a one-off ego play. Shall I write the next chapter? It started with a simple group chat ping the following Tuesday. Marissa's PTA fundraising committee thread, the one I'd created months ago to coordinate bake sales, library fairs, and the scholarship auction, flashed on my phone while I was on my lunch break. I opened it, expecting routine updates. Instead, I saw a new banner at the top. Admin, Daniel Blake. My stomach gave a lurch. Scrolling back, I found the handoff. Viv stepped back to focus on other things, so I'll be organizing from now on. He'd written in that breezy, fake modest tone that played well with suburban politeness. But I hadn't stepped back from anything. I was still deep in receipts, follow-ups, and the March pledge drive calendar. Things that apparently I was now cut out of. The worst part? The comments below his announcement were a mix of "Thanks, Daniel" and heart emojis. No one had thought to ask me why my name had disappeared from the roster. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he thought he was just helping. But a day later, I went to the school office to drop off thank you cards for donors. Something I'd always handled directly with the secretary. She hesitated when she saw me. "Oh, Daniel already took care of that. Said you were swamped and he'd be the point of contact from now on." Her voice was polite, but laced with that subtle, "Oh, I thought you knew," discomfort. By the time I stepped outside into the damp March air, I knew this wasn't clumsiness. It was intentional erasure. He wasn't just hogging the spotlight, he was cutting me out of the actual channels of communication. That night, I called him. "You changed the group chat. You told the office I was stepping back. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" On speaker, I could hear him making himself a drink. "Viv, this is what I mean about you overthinking everything. People see one leader, they trust the process more. The more you cling to titles, the more it looks like I care about credit for 5 years of my work? Yeah, I do." A pause. Then the clink of ice. "You're making this personal when it's supposed to be about presenting a united front." That phrase, united front, was the same one he'd used when he convinced our sister to co-sign his car loan years ago, only to skip payments. This wasn't corporate branding. This was him redrawing the map so my path didn't even appear. And his next move would prove just how comfortable he was crossing lines in plain sight. Shall I write the next chapter? The line got crossed 3 weeks later, in a way that made my throat burn. It was a cloudy Friday morning, the kind where the school gym smelled faintly of damp coats and pencil shavings. The PTA was hosting a community breakfast to thank local donors, and each guardianship family was asked to give a short update about their scholarship plans. I'd been rehearsing a careful joint language speech in the mirror, making sure to credit both of us, to keep Marissa's pride intact while subtly reclaiming my role. But as I walked up to the sign-in desk at the entrance, I saw him already there. Daniel was leaning over the ledger with a donor, one of the biggest in our county, the silver-haired owner of a local construction company who'd promised a matching contribution. "And I'll make sure your check goes directly into the fund," Daniel was saying warmly. "We've streamlined things. One account, direct management. No more committee delays." The donor chuckled, nodding, and handed over an envelope thicker than the usual $100 checks. My skin prickled. "Daniel?" I interrupted gently, trying to sound casual for the donor's sake. "We both handle deposits, right?" He barely looked at me, just patted my shoulder like a child tugging at an adult's sleeve. Donors like one point of contact. Makes them feel secure. Then, turning back to the man, "I'll drop this off after I finish here. Always happy to make time for the important stuff." The donor wished us well and drifted off toward the breakfast tables. My voice dropped to a furious whisper. What envelope was that? Relax, he muttered, flashing his trademark easy grin to a passing parent. It's for the fund. I'll handle it. But the way he angled his body, slightly away from me, shielding that thick envelope in his coat pocket, screamed that he liked holding something I couldn't touch. And worse, every head in the room had just seen him receive it, had seen him be the man in charge. I wanted to yank it from his hands. Instead, I stood there, smiling at acquaintances, my mind screaming that something was slipping, that I wasn't going to get back without a fight. That fight, I decided, would start with a simple, reasonable fix. One he wouldn't possibly argue with unless he had something to hide. Shall I write the next chapter? The following Monday, I marched into the PTA treasurer's cramped office, the air thick with the smell of printer toner and the hum of a very old space heater. Stacks of manila folders leaned precariously on one side of her desk, and in the middle, her laptop was open to the fundraising spreadsheet. I just want to make the process fair, I began, planting my palms on the desk to steady myself. Going forward, could you send all fund statements and deposit notifications to both Daniel and me? That way nothing gets missed. She blinked, chewing on the end of her pen. That makes sense. But I'd need to clear it with the acting lead. I frowned. Acting lead? The treasurer shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Daniel asked that all communications go through him. He said you're stepping back and it's easier if there's only one contact person. Those words again, stepping back, like some official resignation I never gave. My pulse drummed in my ears. Did he give you any reason why I wouldn't get updates on the college fund for my own niece? She hesitated, eyes darting to the hallway. Look, Viv, I don't want to be in the middle, but he implied you're overwhelmed and that he's just taking pressure off you. Overwhelmed? I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Of course, the narrative control. He wasn't just rewriting history about the fund. He was planting doubt about my competence, making it sound like I couldn't handle it. I left with a tight smile, my stomach a knot. As I walked down the hallway toward the main office, I could picture him, relaxed, certain I wouldn't push against a story that made me look fragile in front of the school staff. But fate handed me the truth sooner than I expected, and it wasn't because I went digging. It was because Daniel got sloppy and left his trail where I'd least expect it, in Marissa's own hands. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind where the gutters outside my apartment sounded like they'd burst into song if they could. Marissa had stayed over after school because Daniel was tied up with some last-minute meeting. We were at my dining table, half her homework spread out between us, when she asked if she could borrow my charger. I reached for her iPad to plug it in, and that's when I saw it. A text thread with Daniel's name at the top, still lit up on the screen. I swear I wasn't snooping, but the preview alone stopped me cold. Daniel. She can't handle being outshined. Once I'm on the board, I'll manage the fund myself. She'll thank me later. Marissa must have seen my face change. Is something wrong? She asked. I gently slid the iPad toward me. This is about me, right? She hesitated, tucking her hair behind her ear. He just says you get stressed about the fund, that he can make it easier. Her voice was careful, defensive even, like she was already trying to manage loyalty to both of us. I scrolled up just a little, my heart thudding. There was more. Daniel? Right now, it's under her name too, but I can get it streamlined. People trust me to get things done without drama. Without drama. My breaths came sharp, each word a little knife. It wasn't just a slip, a loose brag. It was a plan. He wanted the account under his sole control. And maybe worse, he was feeding this narrative to others, twisting my concern into fragility. I locked the screen and pushed it back toward her. You know I'll always be looking out for you, right? Always. She nodded, but something fragile had shifted. The seed had been planted. Aunt Viv is emotional. Uncle Daniel is the safe pair of hands. That night, when I was alone, I dug out the original bank documents from my file cabinet. I needed to see the account with my own eyes. I needed to know exactly what he'd already touched, and that meant walking straight into enemy territory. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning, I stood outside the bank, my umbrella dripping onto the pavement, rehearsing what I'd say if Daniel's name came up on some alert. As co-guardian for Marissa's educational trust, I had every right to ask about the college fund account. Inside, the air was warm and faintly metallic with the scent of coins and paper stock. A young teller led me to a private desk where the branch manager, a composed woman in a navy blazer, tapped at her computer. "I'd like a full activity printout for the Marissa Blake College Fund," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes flicked over the screen. "Do you know about the recent transfer?" The word transfer landed like ice in my stomach. "What transfer?" She turned the monitor slightly, showing a pending movement of the fund's balance, 5 years of deposits, into a new account under Daniel Blake as the sole owner. The memo line read, "Consolidation for efficiency." I gripped the arm of the chair. "That's not a joint account?" She shook her head. "Not according to the paperwork we received. The transfer hasn't cleared yet, but it's in process. It'll be finalized in 2 business days unless it's stopped." 2 business days. 48 hours before my niece's tuition safety net disappeared into Daniel's personal vault. "Can I freeze it?" I asked. "You can if you present proof of your co-ownership and joint authorization requirements," the manager replied. "But the transfer request lists Daniel as the sole controller. You may need to resolve that through legal channels." I left the bank clutching the printouts, rain soaking my shoes, my mind buzzing. It was no longer about image or credit. It was literally about control over every dollar meant for Marissa's education. For years, I'd swallowed my anger to keep the peace, to protect her from our sibling politics. But now, peace meant letting him walk off with her future. I knew exactly where I'd expose him, in the one room where his charm counted most, and where I could guarantee he wouldn't see me coming. Shall I write the next chapter? The monthly PTA board meeting was the perfect stage, not because I wanted a scene, but because Daniel valued those rooms. They were his little kingdom. The folding tables dressed up with cupcakes, the polite applause after every agenda item, the sense that everyone there knew him as the dependable uncle who always shows up. I arrived early, clutching an oversized tote bag stuffed with the bank printouts, the iPad screenshots Marissa hadn't realized she'd given me, and a notepad with bullet points so tight I could deliver them without a tremble. When Daniel walked in, he was all easy swagger, the head pat to the vice principal, the hand on the treasurer's shoulder, the joke about carrying a big check again soon. He didn't even glance at me. That told me he thought I was still playing the meek sister role, still letting him set the narrative. The meeting drummed along through bake sale reports and budget updates until the scholarship fund segment came up. That was my cue. "Before we move on," I said, cutting in with a calm I didn't quite feel, "we need to address a financial matter related to the Marissa Blake Fund." All eyes turned. Daniel leaned back, smiling like this was about to be another of my overcomplicated suggestions. I slid the documents across the table to the treasurer first, then to the PTA president. "This is a copy of a transfer request made without my consent, moving the full fund balance into an account solely under Daniel's name. Here's also a screenshot confirming his stated intention to manage it himself once he's on the board." The silence thickened. Daniel's smile faltered, just enough that I caught the crack. "Viv, this is grossly out of context," he started, but the president was already frowning at the papers. "Daniel, is this authentic?" she asked. He launched into a speech about efficiency, about avoiding drama, about how I'd been too stressed. But the treasurer interrupted. A rare thing. The PTA requires dual oversight for all scholarship accounts linked to us. If you initiated this without her signature, that's a serious breach. Around the table, faces shifted. The charm in his voice suddenly sounded thin, self-serving. For the first time, he wasn't controlling the room. And as their questions piled onto him, I realized the reversal I'd been waiting for was already beginning. Though the cost to him, and to our relationship, was about to become brutally clear. Shall I write the next chapter? Daniel's jaw tightened in a way I'd seen only a handful of times. Moments when he knew the crowd wasn't buying his version. "This is ridiculous," he said, looking around the table as if to enlist anyone who'd save him. I was consolidating for convenience. It was always going to be for Marissa. Viv's twisting this into some... But the PTA president cut him off. "We don't allow sole control over joint charitable accounts, especially those tied to a minor's education. You know that, Daniel? This could jeopardize donor trust." A murmur moved around the room. These were people he'd charmed for months, offering to set up tables, joking with their kids, talking about our family values. Now they were looking at him as if wondering what part of that had been real. The treasurer pushed the paperwork back toward him. "Until this is sorted, the account is frozen. And Viv, I'll make sure you get duplicate notifications on all transactions from now on." That was the first win I'd had in weeks, and it landed right there under the fluorescent hum of that library meeting room. But I didn't gloat. I just nodded, the weight in my chest easing a fraction. Daniel didn't look at me for the rest of the meeting. He packed up quickly when it adjourned, muttering a clipped, "Marissa's still staying with me this weekend," as he brushed past. But by the next morning, the fallout began. A polite but unmistakable text from him saying he was stepping away from the PTA to de-escalate, followed by a string of voicemails that swung between wounded, "Why couldn't you just come to me?" and accusatory, "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I knew the ripple wouldn't stop with him quitting the board. The family group chat would buzz. Mutual friends would pick sides. And the fragile trust between us as co-guardians was on the verge of shattering completely. So before he could rewrite this chapter of the story too, I made one last move, something that would lock in the truth before the whispers rewrote it. Shall I write the next chapter? 2 days later, I was in the lobby of a small law firm downtown, my tote now replaced by a sleek, zipped binder. The receptionist offered me coffee I didn't touch while I waited for the notary, my knee bouncing so fast it made the chair vibrate. The plan was simple: formalize our co-guardian financial agreement for Marissa's college fund into a notarized binding document. No more relying on polite PTA norms or understandings. This would put our dual control in black and white, signed, sealed, and recognized by the bank. When the lawyer, a brisk woman with sharp glasses, sat me down in the back office, I laid it all out. The original account setup, Daniel's unauthorized transfer attempt, the evidence from both the bank and that screenshot. She listened, barely blinking, then said, "We can draft an amendment to your guardianship agreement that stipulates joint signatures required for any financial moves. If he refuses to sign, you file for sole educational trustee rights." "Will that make things uglier?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Probably," she said, almost kindly. "But if you don't, you're leaving the door wide open." We had the draft ready within hours. I emailed it to Daniel with the subject line, "For Marissa's protection, urgent." I kept the body short, factual. "Please review the attached, and let's get this signed so there's no confusion going forward. No emotion, no accusation, just a lifeline for him to take if he had any sense left." But when his reply came that night, it was as petty as it was predictable. "I see what this is. You want to box me out. Don't think I don't know you've been talking to people behind my back." And beneath the bluster was the truth. He knew the board meeting had shifted the tide, that his easy grip on perception was slipping. The only question left was whether he'd fight me until the bitter end or sign to save face. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The night we finally spoke in person would be the real turning point, the one that showed me exactly what kind of brother I still had. Shall I write the next chapter? We met at a little coffee shop halfway between his apartment and mine. Neutral ground in theory, though the tension when he walked in told me there was nothing neutral about today. He didn't order anything, just dropped into the chair across from me, his phone face down on the table like a silent threat. I slid the printed amendment across to him. Daniel, this isn't about boxing you out. It's about what's best for Marissa. 2 signatures always. That way, nobody can make a move the other doesn't know about. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You mean so, I can't fix things without you questioning every breath I take. I kept my voice steady. Fix things? Or take control so you get to be the hero in public while I do the grunt work in the dark? His jaw tightened. You don't get it, Viv. People trust me. I've built that. You're intense. Off-putting sometimes. Why not let me use my image to get more for her? The words landed like slaps. Not because I believed them, but because they revealed the calculation. He genuinely thought charm outweighed honesty. Optics outweighed principle. I tapped the paper between us. That image nearly took every dollar out of that account without my consent. This isn't negotiable. If you don't sign, I'll file for sole control. And yes, it'll go public. For a moment, his eyes darted, searching my face, maybe trying to gauge bluff from truth. But this time, I gave him nothing. No flinching. No soft look. Finally, with a muttered curse, he grabbed the pen from my hand and scrawled his name on the line. You're impossible, you know that? I gathered the document carefully, like collecting something fragile but finally safe. No, I said, meeting his stare. I'm just done being silent. As I walked out into the chilly dusk, binder tucked under my arm, I knew the ink on that paper meant more than legal protection. It was the first boundary he'd been forced to respect in years. But it also meant the scaffolding of our brother-sister relationship had cracked for good, and the fallout at home would be its own separate war. Shall I write the final chapter?